6:30. Let's call this meeting to order. We'll start with a roll call. We've got Marianne Barnsley, Brian Murphy, Chris Buckley, myself, Rebecca Hansen, Bridget Powers, Bonnie Sears, Jack Scarborough, and Steve Whitman. And since I think we have 7 of us here, so if Marianne and Steve, you could be voting members and part of the discussion today, that would be great. Let's start with a review of the minutes from our last meeting from March 15th. Any comments, questions, clarifications, typos in the minutes from our last meeting?
I have 2 comments, both on page 3. Public hearing is closed at 7:12, and then you asked if we had any questions. That third to the last bullet point. Ms. Buckley, question, who would be responsible to take care of landscaping? That, I just wanted to clarify that. I wasn't asking who's going to take care of, that almost makes it sound like who's going to install the landscaping. Mm-hmm. My concern, and I just for clarification, if this ever came up in the future, my concern was who's going to maintain that landscaping. I thought that's how I said it. And to me, it's subtle, but, the very high standard of Irving sites, we'll see,
Maintenance is what I understood.
Yeah. So that was one thing. And then the other thing, and I apologize for this, on page 4, on board discussion, Chris Buckley offered to talk with Mike Vignali. I didn't do that, nor do I have I don't even know who Mike Vignali is. I don't remember doing that at all, so I don't know if that was something you need me to do. I'm gonna need a little bit more direct. He was the one that came up with a bunch of questions.
He was the one, yes, and Will Davis had said he would connect with Mike.
Right, he did. Yes. And he has.
Okay.
All right, so it wasn't me.
Right, no, not
right.
this time.
Yeah, okay. Good, because otherwise, I'm losing.
And for the record, so we're changing the first one to dropping to take care of and put in maintain, because it was answered with the next sentence. An operator would be hired to maintain the site, so at least it's consistent. Will Davis.
Right, and the reason I think that's, not to dwell on this, but what that means is one of the people at work at the convenience store is in charge of making, and that's very different than maintaining landscaping, so.
And the understanding was that whoever the proprietor of that establishment was going to be would also include in their contract that they would maintain the property.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and my experience is that doesn't happen, but I.
Is there a mechanism for enforcement?
Yeah. It's violation of site plan. Usually it's a fix-it ticket kind of thing. Those things happen a lot, I'll send them a love letter or a nasty gram, whichever one. And then they'll get on it. We've had no professional maintenance issues with any of those properties out there so far.
Well, what happens is, and I think we kind of talked about this, but it would be something to take up in the future. They bring in these plant materials, and they're pretty marginal plant materials. They stick them in. No one takes care of them. They die. They pull them out, and then there's these empty mulch beds, or they replace them with white stone. It's very typical. And I think there's another, if I'm not mistaken, I think the Irving station down on, I may be totally wrong on this. I think that's what happened. It's definitely, we could find that white stone around here, which is a lot. It's not the same as having nice landscaping.
So I think you bring up an important point, and I think something that is going to come up for us is looking at our site plan, the whole process, and I think that's something that we should, think about including in there if we want. So, but before, if we want to continue discussing that, I think that's great, but let's just bring it back to the minutes for now and just see if there's any other comments, edits. Brian, you got those 2 edits?
I do.
Okay. And we do have now we have 8 people at the table, so do we ask one of the alternates to not vote now? Or does Bill?
Oh.
I wasn't at the meeting, so.
Okay, so that's fine. for this one?
And
Okay.
this will be the only vote taken tonight, I believe.
Except for the ever-popular vote to adjourn.
Correct.
You want to get your motion in right now?
You can't vote on whether or not. All right, so any other comments on the minutes? Does anyone have a motion to accept these minutes as amended,
So moved.
approve them? Anyone?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Minutes are approved. I would just like to say that having numbers instead of bullets is really helpful in reviewing the minutes, so then we don't have to count bullet points. So, I don't know if anyone else, it's just nice if we're reviewing them to have reference points, page number, bullet number, or, number. So,
So instead of bullet points, it could be 2A, B, C.
yeah, just in an outline
Like an
format. It's just easier to sort of find and easily identify what we're talking about. Okay, any public comments unrelated to this evening's agenda? Okay. Moving on to administrative matters, continuing work on edits and layout of the master plan. Yeah, so we have, I don't have any updated versions of the formatting and graphic layout of the master plan itself, so I think we can just, two things I have, or we should have all looked at the Volume 2, Chapter 1, with some comments and edits, and then I have some edits that the Energy Commission, or suggestions that Energy Commission has made for the implementation plan. I want to go through those point by point with everyone. There's only 4 of them, so point by point's not that many. So, so I don't know, Steve, if your class has anything specific to present, or
I
if
don't
we-
know these people, so. But I can address volume 1
Yep.
quickly. So Polly told all of us that he has been working on the land use section, the one that you guys sent to him. He's formatting that now. Knows that he needs to get that to us soon. Does he have the most up-to-date version, or do I have the most up-to-date version of the implementation table?
Chris, you were working on edits for Volume 1, Chapters 2 and 3.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I didn't do any, I couldn't do anything online,
Okay.
so I have a bunch of notes, and some questions.
Okay.
So I work so much better on, either I gotta have one of my kids show me how to download, because I couldn't get I couldn't get anything in an editable form, so I gotta have them show me how to do that.
Okay.
Or I gotta print it out and get you a hard copy that way. And I printed out some pages.
Is that just for, are we just talking about section 3 implementation? Or do you
We're
have
talking about
additional-
that plus.
Do you have additional changes to chapter 2?
I don't know, because I just printed out some,
If you give them to me,
yeah?
I can,
Chapter 2 was the one that you marked up heavily with
Yeah.
red. Yeah, and I kind of read through that, and, I agreed with, yeah.
I can help. I've got
Yeah.
it.
Okay.
So
Can someone get that version to me? Because I don't have that heavily marked up version.
you were on it. You were emailed.
Okay, all right.
Because it was a while ago that
Yeah.
these guys worked on it.
It was
I just don't want him formatting something that's not the right version of the text.
2 February, I sent it out.
Okay. All right, because I asked you like a couple weeks ago
Yeah.
for that copy again, and you said you don't have anything newer, and
No.
so, okay. But,
So do we think that the stuff from early February has your suggestions as well, or it doesn't?
I don't think it does.
Okay.
I don't think it does.
But if you give them to me, I
Okay.
can,
And I have a question, because I may be missing something on some of these charts.
oh, we're not in that, you're looking at chapter,
You look at the data
you're
book.
looking at Volume 2.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right.
So we're still talking about, we've done the vision section.
Yep.
It's just the land use chapter that you guys had helped cut
Yeah, and
back.
that was the one that I just thought was
Yep.
adequately marked up.
yeah.
Okay, so you don't have any changes to the land use
I have
section?
no, I do not. I'm sorry.
We probably do have the right one to Polly.
I think at this point, we just need to roll with that, and, yeah, and we'll do any edits in hand, and then I will figure out InDesign if we don't have Polly at that point, so.
Okay, that's fair.
Okay.
So do I have the most recent version of implementation for him?
You should, I
We
will,
went through that pretty heavy.
yeah, well, at this point, no, because we might make a couple changes
Okay.
because of the Energy Commission, but I want to, since we've gone through everything very deliberately in the implementation chapter, I don't want to just say sure, so.
Right. And he hasn't worked with that yet, but I think the sooner we can get it to
Yeah,
him. the
so,
better.
so no, but I will get him, I've given both, but I don't think he has, this, obviously he doesn't have this because there is no, yeah,
So I'm waived off.
yes.
Yeah, you're released of service again.
And I sent him captions this week.
Yes, he said that.
Since we're sort of still in volume one, to not confuse the issue, do you guys mind, can we just go through these 4 points in the implementation chapter? Okay.
Just what are you looking at
We're
right
looking at the implementation, the 30 bazillion pages
The chart.
of recommendations that's in table format. So,
Chapter 3.
yep, okay. Thank you. And there's, the folks from the Energy Commission track the changes, and I thought there was gonna be tons of changes, but there's only 4. So,
And they're all toward the back, aren't they?
yep, all right, so the first one is,
Do you have an extra copy?
No. but we
and if
can
I had a
share it.
time machine, I would go back and put page numbers on everything we've been working on, but you don't have page numbers. So we're looking in the B section, which is about a third to half of the way through, in the natural heritage goal. And then number 8 and 9 under that. How many people have a copy and how many people don't? I was gonna read this.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you guys want to share and that way? I mean, Bill and Chris.
Bill, take a look, and I think if she reads it, I'll be.
I should take 2 steps back and just say, in summary, the Energy Commission invited a representative from the planning board to talk about the master plan. I went, I think this was in March or February, talked about the process we've been into, or been working on for the past 2.5 years, and sort of in that conversation, and Bill, please jump in if I'm not summarizing this correctly, we realized we haven't put enough energy, assigned any responsibility to the Energy Commission, worked with them closely enough. This is something moving forward, we can certainly work on improving, but I did say that there's little room to insert a lot of text into the master plan because mostly it exists how it does. So they went through and made very few edits, but I specifically asked them to look through the existing recommendations to see if there's anything that they can see that would be logical for the Energy Commission to be responsible for. So, is everyone who has a copy looking at Section B, Natural Heritage Goal, under Natural Heritage Policies, Tasks, and Strategies, number 8, develop an integrated natural resource protection strategy that educates and engages residents in understanding the connections between the most environmentally sensitive areas of town, groundwater resources, surface waters, important wildlife habitat, forests, farmland, recreation resource lands, and greenways through land acquisition, conservation, education, application of best management practices, and/or low-impact development strategies. The Energy Commission has added themselves as a responsible party, and added "and energy projects." This is one that I didn't feel like was completely applicable. Do you want to?
I can hear it.
Okay, all right. I do better if I read, not if I hear. So, any discussion on that edit?
Is there a more
So where are they
appropriate
putting energy
place for
projects?
it?
At the bottom of this one.
Oh, okay, gotcha, all right.
I felt like we were talking more about natural resource protection in this bullet instead of, to me, that seems separate than energy projects. So, in my mind, that is not it doesn't quite work.
I would agree with you.
I
Yeah,
agree.
I think the low-impact development references more to natural resources and stormwater and other ecosystem services, not to energy or commercial development or any other kind of.
Unless we're talking about energy extraction projects, but I
Right.
think that everything else covers that, so. Okay, does everyone agree?
I agree.
So are we striking the energy projects
yeah.
and the?
And I will go back, I will go and fix this, fix their edits, fix this document and get it to Brian and to Polly. All right, number 9 is the next one is just below the one we just looked at. Increase the public's awareness of its role in protecting natural resources and minimizing impacts on the natural environment. Provide information about appropriate water usage, energy production and usage, non-point pollution sources, which should say non-point source pollution, maintenance of catch basins, sediment pools, waste disposal, invasive plants versus native species, land protection options, and other conservation issues. I'm okay with it in this one.
I agree.
Okay. And the only reason I'm going through bullet by bullet is we went through every single item in this, so I really don't think we can change things without discussing it as a board. Okay, so further on in the infrastructure section, the second page of that, number 10, they have added a recommendation that is to actively explore and present to the select board renewable energy possibilities on town-owned property to reduce energy costs to the town, and putting themselves as the responsible party for that.
They've been working on
Yeah.
that for a couple of years, so.
That's rather a self-licking ice cream cone.
How so?
Well, you appoint yourself to be responsible for what you're in charge of.
I would say it's not that obvious though, Jack, because there's been a lot of pushback from town hall.
Well, I'm pushing back.
Is it possible one of the reasons the Energy Commission sort of got left out of this? Well, actually, no, here they are. So they are in here. All right. I was thinking because they were kind of a new, when the previous master plan was written, which a lot of this is based on.
The Energy Commission's 10 years old.
Or was it around when the old master plan was?
No, probably just came out after.
Just after,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, anyway.
I think, and this is something we can't fix with the master plan. We can't fix the fact that they haven't come forward. Maybe we haven't asked them to participate. I mean, they were participating as Plymouth residents. We can't fix that. All we can do is do our best now. And I would like to, we invited them to have a representative on the planning board, as is encouraged in our bylaws. Which you're on the,
I'm no longer on the
Okay,
energy.
all right. So that is open to them, and I think since we do have represented from the Conservation Commission, we will have a representative from the Select Board to, at our work sessions, just check in really quickly to see if you're sitting on other boards in town, what's going on with your other assignment.
In fairness to them, as a former Energy Commission member, the Energy Commission 8 or 9 years ago wrote a chapter for the master plan, presented it to the planning board. It was never adopted. It was an energy chapter. Significant amount of time, grant money went into it. I'd be curious to hear more, Jack, what you're thinking, because for them to state something that's on their work plan, to want to add it to the master plan makes sense to me. It's no different than us saying we need to revisit our regs.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have other thoughts, or if there's a better way we could phrase it, maybe that way.
I would like to study it and give you more detail.
Okay.
The status of it is like
Yes.
imminent. It's no longer medium range. All the cards are on the table, and so now it's either going to happen or it's not, probably within the next couple of years, I would say.
What's that, development of
Yeah,
an
but
energy
it-
project, or?
The solar array at the recycling center. That's the big one at this point.
Yeah, it's not going to happen in a couple of years.
It won't.
No, so I would prefer to leave that language as they propose.
Because it's more general.
Yeah.
I appreciate your comment as you've been on the Energy Commission or on the Select Board. I wonder if we need to add not as a head chief responsibility, lead responsibility, but can we add the Select Board in there as well as
Yeah.
responsibility? So I'd like to do that.
That seems fair.
And you might want to throw a town admin in there too.
All right.
Who else?
Is the town administrator listed on other actions? Okay,
Town administration is.
Right.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Any other comments on this line? There's one more in here somewhere. Here it is. So this is the transportation section. sidewalk policies, tasks, and strategies. Under point number 6, incorporate alternate transportation elements, including but not limited to sidewalks, transit stops, and bicycle racks into site design process to facilitate construction on missing links in alternative transportation networks. They have put themselves in, they have suggested that we added them as one of the responsible parties. It's maybe 3 pages from the end.
4, 3, yeah.
It's sidewalk policies, tasks, and strategies. Page 49 on this one, but,
You page numbers.
And page 50 is the one with number 6.
yeah.
I have no problem inserting themselves as responsible parties into anything.
Seems
So-
like, yeah,
Yeah.
it seems like if
Yeah.
they want to volunteer to help.
Yeah.
And that seems like a pretty good fit.
I think it's good that they're seeing energy in different forms.
I agree.
So, and if we're talking about having them represented on the planning board at some point, that's helpful.
Yep.
Cool.
All right, that is it. Okay, thank you. So now moving on to volume 2.
So I know I did some updates on this master plan as well as you guys did. I'm Ryan Keegan. I did community services and like facilities, and I know I personally updated facilities at Peter Memorial Hospital, the addition to the hyperbaric wound and care center, which I've actually been to. As well as my partner did the police department and emergency services. That was in addition to that. Me.
I'm Travis Sims. So my section was arts and rec, and we actually didn't have this in the original volume 2. So me and my partners added a whole new section. We didn't have anything to work on from scratch. So we added things like Fox Park, the Langdon Woods, the Pemmy Youth Center. We got all the information off the websites or what we could find. A couple of them were just like the Facebook pages. I know the Pemmy Youth Center was just a Facebook page. So I got whatever information I could. I gave it like the basic overall. It seemed like they had like a statement in there like on what they're doing. So stuff like that. Yeah. There was more too. There was there's Plymouth Skate Park, the skate park of Plymouth, and various other arts and recs.
I'm Jeff Ryan. My section was the Plymouth Education, which kind of covered Plymouth State, the elementary school, and the regional high school. And it was pretty much going through updating like student population numbers, cost per student, that kind of thing, upgrading like tables and graphs. The Plymouth State info was pretty easy to find. It was all in their public data. But for like the elementary school and the high school, we had to reach out to them. And we're still waiting back on some data from the Mountain Valley Charter School. I think the number is how many students from Plymouth go to that school. We reached out to them. We're going to continue to keep trying to get in contact with them, but so far they haven't gotten in contact with us.
I'm Dan Frieda. I had natural heritage, me and 2 other partners. Basically, we updated info on like climate, public water systems, things like that. It's pretty easy to find. A lot of it was on the New Hampshire DES website. Yeah, that's basically it.
I'm Sophie Brisser. So me and my group did the first section in chapter 2, which is called Historical Research Profile. Obviously, we didn't change a lot because it's history, so we didn't want to change that. Yeah. We added some data from the 2016 survey that the community did about just like how they value the historical resources and stuff. It's also one section called planning consideration that we left out, that we just marked like planning board look over kind of thing. And added some late early 21st century history too. And I don't know if you guys have it, but one of you should have it on email at least.
Yes, it was emailed.
Okay, just making sure.
Yep.
So any questions or maybe feedback on the first one? I don't know if you got some already.
Yeah, I think I have some feedback. I'm sure some other people do as well. Is that the best way to get feedback to you guys, is just sort of, I mean, I have a lot of notes throughout the document. I'm happy to track changes and send them if that works best for the group. But just some general comments, and I can start, or if someone else can start, that'd be fine. The first thing, I just want to sort of bring it back to the board for a second and just say, as we work on this Plymouth data book, or whatever we're calling it, I don't know if it makes sense to try and get this into this, nice looking format that we're working on with the volume 1. I just want to make sure everyone is kind of on the same page with that we're not envisioning this going to, through the, with lots of pictures. This is more of a reference thing that's backing up the information that's in the master plan.
It has plenty of graphs and charts.
Yep.
And that breaks up the text anyway.
Yep. And the other thing is, I think, so in looking at this, the planning considerations are really just the recommendations that we've been creating for the, or at least from 2008, the planning considerations are actually the recommendations from that master plan. So is that something we want to include in this, or do we want to make reference that say, recommend or reference it back to the implementation chapter of the master plan? I think that's kind of what we have to decide. So,
And I think you could pull them completely too, because the data book seems like it's more of an appendix, a place that you go to look and see under these different topics.
Yep.
Some of the things that drove decision making.
Yep, I agree. So our choices would be, delete it totally, make reference to it back to the regular master plan, or the actual master plan, or copy and paste the recommendations in. So,
I'm easy.
delete.
Yeah, delete, no. It's, I'm easy, either one.
Okay.
Or-
I think I would just prefer to just cut that out of it entirely and just trim it. So it's redundant, so.
Yeah, okay.
Or we can put it in as long as it's not Times New Roman font.
Well, it could be 12, but not 8, definitely not 8.
No, I'd be all for.
I resemble that remark.
What, Times New Roman? 12 font.
Anyone else?
So is it delete?
Delete, all right.
Yeah.
We have no planning considerations here. All right. Okay, so next would be feedback. Do we want to just, I'm afraid we're going to just overwhelm everybody with comments,
It's
but.
really up to the board how you want to deal with it. They came prepared if there were specific questions you had, or if, and I think what you suggested, giving a digital document with track changes, would be best.
Okay.
Because we have a couple of people who assembled it. One of them's here. Dan worked on it. So it'd be good for whoever's going to do the revisions to be able to see exactly.
Can we get a show of hands who knows how to track changes in Word?
I could figure it out.
It's,
There's a button, right?
yeah, there's a button, and you just type once you turn it on. So,
Okay.
yeah. It's what we were looking at with the implementation chapter. That's what it looks like. So you can put comments in there. So if there's questions, I'm happy to start putting, because some of them are typos and things like that I'm happy to just, I think it's a lot easier instead of being like, hey, bullet point 3, needs an apostrophe. Like, I don't think that's useful for anybody. So I can start with my general comments just overall, if that's helpful. Just consistency across the board, fonts, graphics, just trying to get everything to be, and I know you guys are working with a large group that's trying to pull something together, but if there's some sense of like, okay, we're going to use Times New Roman font or something else, just be consistent throughout the whole document and try and make the figures all match each other. Color, not color, I don't think that necessarily matters, but trying to make it a little more consistent. So as we read through it, we're not adjusting ourselves to what different tables and figures mean. In the chapter 1, I just saw a little inconsistency between what was being called the census. I saw a reference to the 2015 census, the 2016 census, and as far as I know, those don't exist. I think those are the American Community Surveys. So just make sure that that's consistent, that we're not referencing a census that didn't exist. And then page numbers are helpful. And
What page are you talking about?
exactly. And then, oh, there's one more thing. That'll come back to me in a second. Oh, I think a lot of places would be served with some bullet points. You'll see, so there's like, here's what's happening in the other towns, colon. And then if we just had those other things in bullet points, I think it would break it up a little better. And then give us a little less of a choppiness from, sentence-long paragraphs. So I think it just would clean it up quite a bit, so. And I should have started off by saying, thank you, this is awesome. So, yeah. I'm quick to go right into all these criticisms, but no, this is great. We really appreciate all the work you guys are doing. Any other comments of a general nature from the board?
I have a question.
Yeah.
If I could ask it, and I just printed out a few pages that had examples of what I was looking at, so I don't know if I'm in the right section, but there was a section with a bunch of graphs. Does this look familiar to you guys, these things? And these graphs are color, so like in this graph, this is, I think this may be chapter, there were 2 chapters, and I think we got chapter 2 and 3. This might be chapter, no.
We sent those today. We didn't expect you to look at them.
Oh, okay. But
You get a gold star.
all right. Well, can I just ask a question?
Oh,
Because
yeah.
I'm confused. Am I missing something? Or here's the graph, there's green, blue, and gold, and I don't see anything that identifies like what the green
Legend.
bar, what's that?
Of what it means?
Yeah, like a little key. And I noticed that on same thing with this graph. So I don't know, wherever these graphs are being pulled from, just
Are there years below or anything below?
There's a
No.
range, but
The-
even still, you get into it.
yeah, and there's certainly plenty of information, and if I knew more about graphs,
Yep.
whatever the 2 arms are, but there's, I could be totally missing something, it could be my own cluelessness, but it seems to me there's a piece of information in some of these that isn't there. And that's, and I guess that was the question, am I missing something, or is there, don't we need to know what the 3 colors are?
Yeah, I would say.
Yeah, so, and I noticed, and I only bring it up because it was I printed out 2 pages that had it, but I noticed it in other ones too. So there would just be something to go through, because it certainly confused me. So, and not to be critical, I'm just saying that.
Well, I'm noticing that one of them is years. One has years labeled, and it might be presumed that you're following over years. The next one, I don't know.
So,
Look at it.
yeah, look at those. And
So moving for any other general comments?
Well, on the stuff that we got today, I wonder if we need to review in particular the art section that you sort of combed together on your own, because I noticed, I think under a PSU activity was the Walkabout Wednesday, which is really not a PSU, but a community activity.
Yeah, I think we need, since these guys were working from scratch and, working with the Plymouth that they know best, then I think it definitely makes sense. Do you want to take on just overseeing that from a content point of view?
Sure.
All right.
I don't know if I know it all. I mean, maybe it would be better if everybody
It's
looked
it's
it
only-
over
yeah.
and, I'll take on what people give me, but I'm not necessarily aware of everything that's going on.
If you could drive the process, that would be
Sure.
helpful, because I feel like I'm
Sure.
maxed out as far
Yep.
as how many copies of different things I can manage.
I noticed there was an issue with the properties of Plymouth, which, there was like 9 cemeteries that were mentioned, well, actually it was 13. One of the properties that wasn't in there was Skateboard Park, Tenny Mountain Conservation Easement, that wasn't in there, but, so some things need to be modified and inserted.
So it seems like passing this document around would be helpful in tracking changes. I think we need to try and turn this around as quickly as possible, so in the next week, if we can do that. So I am not sure the best way to do this. But I can start with the chapter 1. If someone else can start with chapter 2, and someone else can start with chapter 3. who is willing to be part of the tracking changes editing team?
I can volunteer.
All right,
I'd like to get it last.
okay,
Um,
great.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so I'm gonna address, so who's able to, so Bill?
Okay.
My
Me.
problem is I don't know what the most current one is, so.
Maybe I
Bridget?
can,
Or she volunteer.
Dawn, would she be the best
Do you
one?
want, you wanna be on
Connor may.
the,
Okay.
just the
I
recreation?
keep it on
Arts
my
and
computer.
Rec.
Arts and
I mean,
Rec.
but I can look
She's
over
coming.
the whole thing and
She'll
take,
print it up
are
if
you
I ask her
thinking
to,
that,
but I'm the
that
one who does
everyone will submit
just
their
call me.
comments to one person who will then go in and do the edits?
I was gonna come up with a roundtable or a schedule where maybe the chapter with the arts and rec can start with you. You can make some edits specifically focusing on the arts and rec resources. And then I'll say, when you're done, send it to so-and-so, and then we'll all track changes. Because the way the track changes work is you make comments and they'll show up as the ones you
Right,
wrote.
right.
And then I can then add comments. So they'll come up as different people, but we can all make changes in the same document.
I'm going to speak out of turn, but there's like Google Docs. I don't know if you ever heard of
Yeah.
Google Docs.
Yeah, you can check it in, check it out, or modify, yep. And that's, I think we suggested that at one point, but
I didn't know.
No, I think
It's a
it's a
good
good idea. How many of those of us that are editing, I'm just worried about pulling it into Google Docs and having a bunch of formatting changes at this point, since it is a Word document. I think I would prefer to do that instead of, yeah. So,
Yeah, I think we've already had some issues with some of the graphs as they've gone through the
Okay.
various iterations.
that makes sense why some of the graphs have come out a little funky.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna start with chapter 1. Bridget, can you start with chapter 2?
Volume 2, Chapter 3.
Chapter 3?
Right.
Okay. And then.
But I would like for people to submit to me what resources are missing from
Okay.
the arts and recreation profile.
Okay. By Saturday, please let Bridget know, and I will send an email out. I'm gonna try and do my best to follow up with an email on Friday or Saturday after each board meeting and say, hey, this is what we said we're gonna do.
It's helpful.
It'd be even more helpful if I can remember to do that. So, arts and rec, recommendations to Bridget. Okay. All right, so who would like to start with volume 2, chapter 2?
Sure, I'll do that. Volume, so you. And can I do this and should I track these changes online? Is that what you would prefer?
I would prefer, because the other option would be print it out, write it down, give it to me, and then I'll track them.
All right, I'll figure it out.
And I can walk you through it over the phone if
Yeah,
you
you
need
could
to.
do
It's,
that.
yeah.
Or I can.
I just haven't done it. Jen can do it. She'll.
When you see how easy it is,
Yeah, yeah.
you'll be
yeah.
doing it all the time.
Yep.
Yeah.
And why don't whoever's starting each section put a footer in it that has the draft date? So that we can keep track of which one's which when we all come with our different copies with different dates.
So what should happen?
yeah, we'll have one document.
Yeah, what will happen is, since all of our edits they sort of build on each other's. So your edits might show up in pink and mine might show up in blue. So they should all work together. So, and you can actually merge comments too, which is, we don't need to do that, but those are the track changes. It's really handy. Yeah, so I think we should be fine to just, I do that anyway, and that way we have a draft date on there. I think that's helpful, but we should be able to track changes, and I can show you afterwards.
Okay.
I will say, having read through a lot of their early drafts for section 2 and section 3 of the data book, which you just got today, you're going to see there's just a little bit of updating. Some of the school stuff like Jeff talked about is more substantial, and they got all that. And so some of those tables will stand out, and there's some really good information there, actually. Surprising information. But a lot of it you'll see, as was said, like the historical stuff, there's pages and pages that hasn't changed. And then there's a little bit at the end, because Sophie went and met with the historical folks next door. So it's not going to be as onerous as section 1 was, which was so data heavy.
Yep. As I tackle chapter 1, I'm probably going to make more comments than I am actual edits, and let these guys handle the edits, if that
That's fair.
That works. Otherwise, I think it'll become too complicated with the track changes. Okay, so we've got, oh, sorry, I wrote down. So we've got, Chris is gonna get 2. Bridget, we got 3. Are you good with editing after that first tag? I'm just trying to figure, I want like at least one other person on the board to look at each one of these, so it gets passed to someone else. So what I'm gonna do is actually make a little chart, like Chris sends it to so-and-so, and sends it to them, we send it to Steve. So, I'm happy to get cycled through each of these.
Who do you want me to send it to? You? Or someone else first?
Bill, do you wanna get in on these?
Yes.
You wanna get in on the action?
Okay, so I will make a chart. Chris, are you available for editing other documents beyond just the one you start with?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
All right, Bridget, is 1 enough for you?
1 is fine.
Okay. Jack, would you like in on this fun editing merry-go-round?
I defer.
Okay, it's up to you.
You
If
had
you
fun
want.
the first time.
Yeah.
You put a lot of time in.
You did.
Okay. We might, then if it works
Yes,
for you,
I
we'll keep
will.
it on this side of the table.
I'll do it.
Oh, you'll do it, okay.
Yeah.
So I'll add you, and I'm gonna make a little schedule, so, everyone sees at least some of those. It might not be everybody sees everything, if that's okay. If you have specific comments, get them to the assigned person, and I'll send that email comment.
And how about this too? Because if it sounds like you're putting together a pretty good system for how we're going to do this in a timely manner.
Yeah.
And if at some point it gets bogged down and we need to get it back to them, if it's going to stay a Word document, it doesn't have to be an InDesign. We can make a couple of changes with the footer and with the headings so that it's consistent across. And then when they've done everything that's been addressed in the comments, it can come back here and it'll still be a Word document.
Right, we can still work on
if you
it,
guys
yeah.
have a chance to read it again without so much of a rush, we can always make changes.
Okay. All right. So I'm gonna make a little schedule. I don't know how else to do this, because it's hard, and I'm like, everyone make comments, and then we wait 2 weeks, so.
Right.
I think just trying to drive this is a little faster, so we'll try and get stuff to back to you by a week from tonight.
That'd be awesome.
Okay. Does that work for everyone? I'm hoping I'm not making this more complicated than it needs to be, but I just, yeah, I feel like it's, unless there's a sort of something driving this, it's just staggers, so.
If you could
Happy
please
changes.
clarify what I'm doing.
Yeah, yeah. So,
What's Jack doing?
oh, I am going to put you in on so in this rotation where I'll send you chapter 1, then you can edit it and get it to Steve. So there'll be I just can't seem to formulate how that's gonna work
Pretty well edited
right now.
This is the data book.
Okay,
This is the
Yeah.
data book.
got it.
So it's like the appendix.
Bonnie,
Not
I
as exciting.
don't mean to leave you out of this.
No, I was just thinking, I don't have a computer, so I can't even find where you're talking about on the paper.
That just means you're off the hook.
It certainly does.
So we can print out, we can get copies printed out to you if you'd like. And maybe that makes.
Usually Brian,
Yep.
because I've got something from Brian I picked up the other day, but this sense of place, that was just here tonight, so I don't know.
I think
First
that's,
time I'm looking at it.
is that that's the one that just
That
circulated
you
today?
sent out today, I
Okay,
believe.
all right.
Yeah,
Did that come from Steve?
Part 2. It came from,
Yeah.
Dylan sent it today.
yeah.
Okay.
So this is the
Yeah.
first time I'm seeing it.
So if you have comments on 2 or 3, you can get comments to Chris on 2 or Bridget on 3.
Seen it. Do I have that here in front of me?
Yep, you've got volume 2, chapter 2 is that one,
This one.
right? Sense of place? Or is
Yep,
that-
that's
okay.
volume 2, chapter 2. You
See,
might
I
wanna
don't
write
see any
that at the
chapter
top.
here.
Yeah.
There's no chapter, so I'm
So-
like,
There's your first comment.
So Bonnie, so what you can do maybe is, because you'll need to get that hard copy to me, right? So if, maybe through Brian, you can do that? And you could just email me and let me know it's in
Yeah,
town.
yeah,
and
I
come
can,
get
I
it.
can take hers and scan it and email it to you direct.
Oh, okay.
And
Or I
then,
can pick it up.
Either way.
Yeah.
Well, that way I could get the copy back to Bonnie.
Okay,
Either.
all right.
Great.
and if you've already passed on your comments to somebody else, so if Bonnie's comments go to you, but you've already volleyed it to someone else, just forward them along.
Okay.
So,
how's my comment gonna go to anybody?
you're gonna get it to Brian and he'll distribute.
Okay.
It's like, who's on first?
I'm afraid I've just made it a mess.
If you give me a
but-
phone number, I'm all set, but I don't have a computer.
You should have, the board list has everybody's phone numbers on it.
Where's,
Yeah.
where's Curly?
You're right.
Ryan, can you mention that there are a couple things that are highlighted?
Yeah, so in my section, the community services and facilities, the section with the Peace Public Library, that's highlighted, that's the old information. My partner, he got information for the Lansing Library, so that wouldn't work, so we did get the old information in and highlighted it, as well as in the right in the sewer section, sewer and water, there's a section about water use, I believe, and that's highlighted as well. So that is also old information.
Okay.
Waiting on that as
So
well.
just a couple of data points that they're waiting to hear back from departments on.
So the library one is all highlighted, but the water and sewer,
There should just be like one small paragraph
okay,
in there. If you see it,
yep.
yeah, that's it.
In the
That'll be
Mountain
difficult
Village.
for them
So I won't
to
look at
provide.
those until
those-
you give me the new ones.
Yeah, those are old.
And it should just be a number going in, like, those shouldn't be too substantial. It's really a replace of what's there,
Especially the sewer one. That one's not very.
right?
Okay. Well, we'll try this, and if I've made a mess, I'm sorry. I will edit everything if it's a mess. But just trying to figure out a system.
Let's make it a mess.
Oops. Yeah, total mess. I shouldn't have volunteered to do that. Okay, so I'll have a system. I might try and figure it out tonight, but I'll definitely get it into this email that sort of summarizes the work that we've promised to do.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions?
I have a question, I always do. Are we officially, and this would be for you, Bill, I guess, are we still, there's a reference to North Country Council. Is that, and I can't remember exactly, it was on page 24 of some document, I wrote that much down, but I just wonder, are we officially still with North Country Council?
Yeah, at this present
Okay.
time, yeah. It's in the hands of like OSI right now, and they're going to, just for your information, they're gonna interview the two planning commissions to basically see what is more appropriate for us.
And then it has to go to governor and council.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, theoretically, that's, at that point, it might be rubber
Executive
stamp,
council.
unless someone has a real issue with that, but
So it'll stay what it is until, and if we hear, I mean, it's the data book. This is, we can change this
Yeah.
whenever, so. Okay. Great. Thank you, guys. This is
Thank you.
awesome.
Yes.
We couldn't do it without you.
Have a good night.
Madam Chair, do you recall if we referenced our helpers in the acknowledgements
Of the,
and for the master plan?
the thank you page, or something like
Yeah.
that.
I think we were I think I was supposed to build an acknowledgements page, but yes, they will be in there, and if they're not, we will make sure they are, so.
Okay, yeah, that's all I wanted to make sure.
We can give you, if it's easiest, to do the name of the class and Holly's name or whatever you want to do.
Yeah, I mean, I leave it to the board to see what do we think. I actually, I think that might be the simplest, just because there's a,
Yeah,
seems like there's a
15 of them, so.
lot of them, yeah.
they'll trump us.
Yeah,
There'd be
Depending
more
on how much
name
room we have on
members
that
than on
page.
the acknowledgements.
yeah. So,
And Polly's spending a lot more time because he helped with this. He did a lot of the education stuff with Jeff, but he's also doing all the formatting because he chose to, because he wanted the experience. So I think mentioning him by name would be nice.
I think so, yeah. I mean, I feel like they're doing classwork, he's volunteering in addition to, that's kind of how I'm seeing
Right.
it.
And it's certainly a skill none of us have, so
Right.
Right.
it's tip a
And
hat
they've
to
learned a
them.
lot, which
Yeah.
has been great.
That's what I was wondering, I'm just curious as to how this project has gone over.
Yeah, I mean, they've had to figure out where some of the data sources that they're using are basically the data sources that were used last time, so they've had to go back. Most of those have been updated. Some of the census stuff isn't up to the year maybe you'd want it.
Yeah.
Some of the state agencies are reporting data different. Dan had to get on the phone with DES because some of the stuff that was in one of the public wells, we have that table. Some of that he had questions about, so he had to get on the phone with them. They've had to talk with the superintendent. So it's been good experience for them to see this is how you get the information, and they're getting a deeper perspective of Plymouth and the complexity of a town. So it's been good.
That's great.
I got a call from Mark Halloran asking who these guys were asking questions.
Did you?
Yeah.
Good.
So regarding the charter school,
Yes.
if there's no answer forthcoming, you can probably contact Dick Cage, because he's on the board of
I
directors.
don't believe he is anymore.
He's not?
And Polly is the one tracking it down, and he's talked with Katie. He's emailed with Katie, who I believe is now the director.
Yeah.
And he's going to be calling her tomorrow. She wants to connect by phone, so I think we'll have it. It just wants a count. It doesn't need student information or anything. So
Right.
I think that just realizing that sometimes you have to pick up the phone to get your questions answered is a lesson that is important. So.
or sometimes you have to go to the Historical Society the one day they're open.
Yeah.
Which Sophie had to do. So.
Okay. Are we good with the master plan? Okay. I'm trying my best to keep us on track, but I'm overwhelmed with all of this too, and I don't know which draft is what, and so.
Getting there.
Okay, new business, zoning interpretation, to clarify the interpretation of an Airbnb in light of the definition in zoning ordinances as it applies to zonal issues. Brian, do you want to introduce this to us?
Yes, I received a call from a citizen looking to develop an existing piece of property that's kind of languished on Main Street. Wondering had been attempts made before to make it a dwelling unit or a two-family, shut down at the zoning board level. It's offices and, I'm kind of loath to give out too much information because I think their purchase might depend on, what they can do with it. But it's in the village commercial zone. There's it requires a special exception for residences on the first floor, and this is a ranch. So, it would be wiped off anyway, except when I was talking to the applicant, or the potential applicant, she said, we won't be offering kitchens. It'll be just overnighters. There's plenty of restaurants around, rather than dip into their business and get them out in the community. And of course, it's less upfront cost to do something like that. Now, one of the main points in our dwelling unit definition is that it has all facilities. So that led me down the track of, is this a commercial, is it a business as opposed to a residence, and what's the interplay between the two, which, because of the nature of our licensing and taxes, we don't really look at businesses as being any different from residences other than what they do within their walls, right? So, but we never had one that was both, other than the few motels around and things of that nature. So, I was looking at it like that. And then, you come across some other things, and I made some printouts of this for everybody, and of course didn't get one for myself. One is that, there was something above. So I already talked about the dwelling unit, which doesn't talk about kitchens, or requires a kitchen. And then in the list of types, and this is for parking, and I'm not sure why that's even in there. I think I might have copied the wrong page. At any rate, so we have a hotel definition, which is a building or a group of buildings which contain 4 or more apartments or living accommodations for 10 or more persons with or without kitchens. So I stopped right there. So, it's that. And then going a little further, it's which constitute the primary temporary abode of persons who have their residence elsewhere. Includes motel and hotel. So it kind of tells me that it's a commercial thing instead of a residential thing. And, moving down through there, okay, here it was. Of course, the very last thing I came across was that it was a permitted use in that zone, which kind of takes the question off the table, but it led me to think we're seeing a proliferation of this, even though it's not really apparent to folks on the street. I mean, it's not invasive at all. We all know the tiny house down on Russell and Summer Street is one of those, which is a great use for it, and it doesn't affect anybody outside of that. But there again, that's taking place in a residential setting, so we know what it is. Whereas this is something that's a little bit different than the red carpet or the inn. It's not a rooming house because they don't have the numbers. You know what I'm saying? So I wanted the board to start thinking about, is this type of occupation, is it going to have an effect in the community? And if it is, maybe we should start thinking about this for the next amendment season, because they're becoming more and more popular all the time. It's not a matter of, I mean, we don't know, because I don't think any of us live next to one, so we don't know if there's disruption on the street by having one there. Though, by opening it to a public hearing, maybe we could get that information if we wanted to pursue that going forward.
Well, I think with the accessory dwelling unit too, we've sort of, I mean, in a roundabout way, opened it up for opportunity for more of that as well, because there's nothing
But
that's.
that has so many strictures on it that
Right.
it pretty much keeps it away from that kind of use. Though
So-
it's possible.
So a clarification, without getting into the details of the example you gave, it
Yes.
sounds like it's a small version of a hotel.
Yeah,
It may not have as
probably.
many rooms as other hotels. but
It
it's
might
a-
have 2 accommodations.
So it's a
I can't say
micro
dwelling
hotel.
Not for 10 or more people, right?
Right.
Right, so there's all these definitions and they all point at different things.
But that sounds like a use that's being designed, constructed to
Yes.
serve as a hotel, short-term overnight accommodations, and it's commercial and it fits in the zoning and.
Right, but it seems to fit, the whole idea of this particular B&B or Airbnb is that it doesn't have the kitchen, which is, essential in all the other definitions, which tells me, you can't say it's that because it does not meet it at all.
But most hotels don't have a kitchen.
Right, right. But then again,
Does it have a microwave?
no, it would have a mini fridge, but no microwave.
Is anyone with the?
Now, the hotel has 4 or more apartments, so there's a quantitative difference between that.
Right, okay.
Is anyone with the zoning ordinance, can they read the definition of tourist home? This is the first time I have not brought my whole binder to
That'll
the
teach
planning
you.
board.
Yeah,
I will bring it next
I
time.
have it right here.
Yeah.
A building or part thereof, other than a motel or hotel where sleeping accommodations are provided for transient guests with or without meals, and which also owner occupied.
Owner occupied.
Okay, so that,
That's the
Which
difference.
not.
is also owner occupied, yeah.
so I mean, the tourist home would fit more with the accessory dwelling unit
Yep.
than it would with the other one.
So we had an instance, and I feel like this is a pivotal point for me on the planning board, because I can now say, a couple years ago, we had this
All
case
right.
come before the board. For better or worse, I'm now at that point, but, where it was at what is now the dispensary.
Yeah.
Does anyone else
The
remember?
Commons
this?
Development is what that was called, on the corner of Smith Bridge and Tenny Mountain.
Yeah, so it was a sample home.
It was a model home.
Yeah.
Model, yeah, sorry. It was a sample, it was a model home, and they wanted to rent it out for tourists. And they were gonna like disconnect the stoves, or take the stoves out of there to make it so that it was not a home, a residence.
Right.
And and that's where I feel like the tourist home came in to that
Yeah.
somehow.
Doesn't seem like it's quite.
That was the
there.
closest definition we had to
Yeah.
that particular use, though.
Yep,
Just because of the with or without kitchens phrase in the
Yeah.
definition.
So what was the other requirements for a tourist zone?
And owner occupation.
Oh,
I think, I mean, for me, I hate to cloud it with the Airbnb thing, because the Airbnb is just a way of booking your stay for however you're gonna
Yes.
stay. But I think the way you described, it seems like there's this different size and number of units that
Yes.
kind of doesn't fit our other definitions, and someone doesn't live on site, there's no on-site manager per se. And so maybe it does need a definition, so we know what it is.
yeah, I mean, to me, I almost wonder if we can modify the tourist home
Yeah,
definition
that's
so
what I
that
was
it, with or without owner occupation, because that to me seems kind of inconsequential.
Or create a new category
Yeah.
that's very specific.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think at this point, I got my own question answered, because it fits so well with a hotel motel. And that being the permitted use in that zone tells me that it's not considered a residence, because residences are restricted from the first floor. So there's nothing in there about that. And it doesn't appear in the residential category list. It's in the uses list of, you know, for the rest of the zones.
So you're saying call it a hotel and then not
Well,
worry about?
motel.
Yeah, and not worry about the fact that it's, you know, no business on the first floor, because that's the business, is the fact that it's a hotel.
Right.
Or motel.
You know, it's kind of,
Yeah.
and the impact is a heck of a lot different than somebody who's residing there for a month or more.
Is there a definition for, sorry, that I don't have my zoning ordinance, because I'm just looking at this, what defines a dwelling unit?
Oh.
What, and I mean, I can read that one because I have it in front of me, but the, rooming house, is that something we?
Rooming house is about numbers.
Numbers, okay.
The dwelling unit, and the reason I included that is because it contains independent cooking. And I was told that there would be no kitchens in here. So it can't be considered a dwelling unit per our definition.
Dwelling unit shall not include a tourist home, which is slightly contradictory.
Well, also to include hotel in the definition for hotel.
Yes.
It's kind of.
Yeah.
Okay. It'd be interesting to see how other communities are dealing with this, because this is certainly not something that's unique to
But,
Plymouth, so.
you know, to serve my purposes, I guess I'm asking if my interpretation that this is a permitted use under the definitions and the categories in the zoning ordinance, if it is in fact a permitted use.
Is
As
this
a
right
hotel.
on, right on Main Street?
As a hotel motel, because everything indicates that it's that type of a use versus a residence or a dwelling unit, which has all the facilities.
Well, I mean, I think it fits better with hotel,
Yeah.
except for the numbers thing.
Right, right. But of course, what's motel say if it's in there? I don't think there's a definition for motel.
As in like number of units?
Right.
Right. I mean, your rational, the way you went through that analysis makes sense to me. Yeah. And if they were going to do this, they're in a situation where it would likely require a site plan?
No, because it's an existing building with no outward changes to it.
Okay, okay.
Which kind of goes to, you know, change of use kind of stuff. You know, and I think the applicant would be more than happy to come forward with that. But, you know, I always had a disagreement with changes of use with no outward changes being included in site plan review.
Right.
But I understand why it's there. I mean, you know, but, you know, and in the future, I would like to have that clarified too. Because it would seem to me that, you know, if it's a permitted use, then, you know, it should follow all the way through. A jewelry store equals a stationery store equals, you know what I'm saying? When you convert that to a restaurant, yeah, because there's other things that come in, and noise, and Frank's 5 points of zoning. But, you know, as far as the categories of business, even though they're not selling trinkets, they're not selling food either. You know what I mean? So, but it's mercantile. And it isn't always tracking with fire code occupancies. Because they look at things a little bit differently, you know. But, you know, I think that if we are trying to welcome commerce in the town, that would be one way, not to grease the skids, but at least stop throwing up barriers. Because it's expensive, you know, for somebody who's doing, you know, by the bootstraps development, you know, it's a $400 charge just to see whether you can do it or not, and to have a bunch of people tell you why you got to do it different. Which isn't a bad thing, but again, you know, it is off-putting to a lot of people who are on a shoestring budget.
I know you don't want to give too many details on this particular property, but it's within the Village Commercial
It is.
District? Is it within like the core of downtown? And okay. Because I know some, I mean, there's a reason why residences aren't allowed, but it seems, trying to provide room for those type of businesses where people can walk to them, so. But if it's not within that.
It's not even in like an evening occupancy type of area
Yeah.
either.
'Cause
Like
we
where the
did-
restaurants are located in that.
I'm going to do this twice in one meeting. A couple of years ago, we we did in the where 174 Pizza was.
Yes.
Well, the zoning board made a special exception to allow for the downstairs because it was far enough out of town that having a residence there did not seem to be blocking other businesses from coming in because it was out of the general foot traffic zone. So.
We're just looking at you in awe.
I can't wait.
Someday.
This would be you, Bridget.
Yeah. I'm actually a little embarrassed that I've done that twice because.
I think it's great.
Yeah.
So would an exception be required because it doesn't meet the number of 10? Is there a?
Well,
No, because there's no number put for motel.
Yeah, but it says well, so how you go into it that? Because it doesn't say motel, it's just.
Well,
Well,
it
for the
says-
purposes in that one, it said to
It
be
shall-
considered motel or hotel,
Yeah,
right?
so I presume then that the
four.
definition is the same
4 more apartments, 4 or more apartments.
for 10 or more persons.
So, or living accommodations for 10 or more, but it seems like 4 apartments seems like a minimum bar.
And so there is no definition for motel?
No.
Okay. And because that it says this shall include motel
Well,
and
and so,
hotel.
yeah, that's where they cover it in that, though the uses are different. And then again, so maybe I was incorrect in my assumption that it was a permitted use, but then again, because it doesn't appear in the book, it's either going to be a variance or you guys are going to say what it is.
I'd be tempted to, to go for like the variance because it meets a hotel with the exception of maybe the number of units.
Yeah.
But- Which sounds pretty easy to get a variance for, but.
No, not in Plymouth, but anyway.
Or they can come just directly before us and we determine its use? Or we determine its use now? Is that what you just said?
Right, we could certainly go that round. I mean, I think that would be better handled at a public hearing.
Oh, well, yeah.
But, as far as, and that could be the determination made here tonight. That, you'd have to get more meat on the details on that. And, before you could officially make a ruling on it, you have to sit in public hearing.
And wouldn't the abutters would have a lot to say about?
Yeah, everybody down there
Yeah.
who would abut it would have
Yeah.
their say in that, which is not a problem. But, see, this is what I face, it's, there's a lot of conflicting information for zoning ordinance, or it's absent.
Right.
So when
Or
you
there are
try and draw
numbers.
these,
Numbers that would seem arbitrary, like why that number of rooms
right,
for that use.
because probably there were, if you were gonna rent a home in the past, you were a long-term rental. The idea of renting for a weekend is fairly new.
Well, the way I see it, it has a lot to do with anybody that's living right beside them. I mean, if you're living right beside this and you say, well, whatever this is, isn't gonna bother me and it's right beside me, then that's the person that knows, if there's a problem with it or not.
Right.
Because,
Impact-wise, there are no residential abutters.
oh,
So,
there isn't?
there may be a second floor.
I have no idea where you're talking about, so I don't.
Right,
Yeah, because it's like,
Mysterious.
it's like
Yeah,
business,
it's
so
like, I don't know
therefore
what to say, I
they're,
don't know what you're talking about.
butters are businesses.
yeah,
It sounds like we would need more information to really, to come up with, it seems vague enough that it's hard to visualize.
okay.
That's what I'm just, I don't know. What does everyone else think?
Is there
I
parking
think you're right,
for
because you
that?
don't know we don't know what they're talking about, right?
Yeah, but they haven't purchased it, right? Or they
No.
have, okay, so, you can't nail it down. They just kind of wanted a semi-ruling.
Yeah.
So we probably can't carry it much further. 'Cause we're not going to have a hearing
Yeah,
based
I
on.
think what I'm getting here is that the consensus is that it's a variance. And that you might require a minor site plan review for this.
So I may be missing something, but under the definition for hotel, a building or group of buildings which contain 4 or more apartments or living accommodations for 10 or more persons. So there's got to be somewhere the definition if it's less than that, right? So if it's, what is there or no?
Oh, there should be.
And there's not. So that seems like that's the oversight. We need a definition for whatever it is that's, I mean, because this doesn't cover everything.
Right.
Didn't they ever consider, well, what if it is, I mean,
Well, then we refer back to that book or that appendix that you had for just typical zoning, definitions. And then see if we can find something that we might want to consider putting on a warrant to put it on the, so, but that's like long-term, but,
a low-tel, that's a bit.
ooh, I like that.
A no-tell.
Well, that's.
But it
That's a
seems-
different old thing.
Yeah, that's different. But
You don't want it downtown.
it sounds like we would like to create a permitted use for this, but we don't have, there's nothing that exists right now.
Right.
But regardless, it is a commercial use and a change of use,
Yes.
so, which should trigger a site plan.
But it doesn't fit our definitions,
Right.
any of them, for residents.
Yeah.
Is the thing.
So
And on the first floor living is, it's very specific as far as in the village commercial, as far as first floor residences. So if you don't have a kitchen, according to us, you're not a dwelling unit,
Yep.
which equals residence.
So it's accommodations,
Unless it's
not
a,
residence.
unless it's a
Yeah.
hotel.
Yeah, unless
And
it's a
still
hotel.
business, Yeah.
But it's less than 4 rooms, so it's not one of those either,
Right.
so.
So when I heard something about a B and B, is that supposed to be like a bed and breakfast?
Yeah,
Is that what they're
well,
saying?
that's what they call it, and it's, Steve, you might have a little bit more information on that. It's a type of thing where you can take your single-family home and put it into a temporary rental pool, a short-term. So you're coming to Plymouth for the 250th, and Bonnie has, either a house or a room allowing people to stay, and generally more than a single room or an apartment.
Could be a tent or a bus or
could
a
be,
tree
yeah.
house.
Yes, yes.
But
it's-
you have to give them breakfast if it says B and B, right?
This is Airbnb, which is more of a
It's just a
mechanism
rental.
for renting out your
Right,
place.
right.
Oh.
It's a way of
Right?
making
It's not
commercially
really a
available
thing.
property that wouldn't, it's like, you can book places anywhere. Instead of staying in a hotel, you're gonna stay
Yeah.
in somebody's school bus parked out behind their house.
So wouldn't that come under the bed and breakfast thing that people
But
already?
it's not really a but Airbnb, that doesn't even matter. That's just the
Yeah.
name of a website. There's others, there's also VRBO, there's other websites that do that.
It's just
so-
a way that people
Yeah.
do rent out some space they
Yeah,
own.
okay.
But it tends to be more under the radar, except we
And
happen
I'm
to know
sure-
a few of them.
Yeah, people are already doing it, not having entertained any of these questions.
Well, it
Right, but
becomes-
that's in a residential setting,
Right.
so it's, and we don't really pry that deeply into who's renting to whom, as long as, they're not renting to 50 people for a weekend.
Right.
Where it becomes an issue is meals and rooms taxes, so, which is become an issue in cities in a lot of places.
So until we see like people coming out of M&M scoops and their jammies, then we don't have to worry about
There's
that.
nothing wrong with that. We host parties all the time. I mean, college kids wear their pajamas all the time.
True, yeah.
Go to Walmart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
Thank you, I'll take that back to the applicant.
so
for
you've
the
made some sense out of that.
question.
And you proved that it was not easy.
I think you proved that there needs to be a separate provision.
Yeah, pretty
I think
much.
that it is a good idea to encourage.
I mean, part of the idea of
business.
the planning board is to, plan ahead. So, and this is, it's already in process, but it's finally catching up to Plymouth, so,
Ryan in
nobody has complained in the community about it. But you can see that somebody might at some point, so we better be ready when it becomes a lot more common.
This does bring up a couple other issues, just sort of, our zoning ordinance for one. And we've been so focused on the master plan that I think our zoning ordinance is, I mean, it's a mess. I'm not sure what we can, how we can fix it as a board without making it worse. So I just want to we need to start thinking about.
It's a lot of confidence in us.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think you're all wonderful. But just trying to think about how can we make this better without just adding more definitions and more circular things, and this is just an idea, so nobody bite my head off or anything, but is this something we can start thinking about getting professional help for? I mean, is this something, we put all this, we get a consultant for a master plan, it's not uncommon to get a consultant for a zoning ordinance overhaul. So, just something to think about as we try and figure out what to do with this, because I think it kind of is a mess, so.
What can Lakes Region Planning Commission do for, I wonder if they can take a whack at it.
It would depend who on their staff,
Yeah,
but they
no, that's what
could.
I'm thinking.
They could. I mean, what it would help with is it would keep it moving forward,
Yeah.
because we would say, here's what we think, here's what we said the master plan about this particular district.
Yeah.
We could have a conversation about what standards we want to change, we could get public buy-in, they could draft it.
I don't know that many of the things that were brought forward in the last master plan made it into the zoning ordinance either, the
Right.
recommendations, so.
Right. So it's ready.
Yeah,
So-
right, I think is the term.
So moving forward, as we start to exit the master plan tunnel, is I'd like to start actively using our work sessions, and I'd like to try and do it in two different ways. First, I'd like to try and do some sort of like board development where like we can learn about site plan review, because I mean, this is my only experience on a planning board. I think a lot of us are new, but trying to get some more information where we can be like, okay, this is what we can do, this is how we can make changes, and then start to work on our, a little bit of strategic planning for the board. What do we see us doing in the next year? How are we going to plan out what's going to happen coming up towards warrant season, if we can call it that? So I just want to start actively using our work sessions for that. So hopefully we'll be doing that starting in July. But so if anyone has any ideas on like what you want to learn more about, then we can try and find somebody who can come in and maybe talk to us about subdivisions or something like that. So.
And that's awesome, Rebecca, because I was thinking kind of the same thing, that this is definitely the case with the Conservation Commission, but I think sometimes the planning board too is reactive and
Yes.
not proactive. And particularly with this master plan, once it's finalized and we have that document, that gives us so much latitude to start thinking about, okay, how can we get ahead of the curve, and how do we make this town look like what people told us they wanted to look like?
Right.
Yep. So I see, an annual strategic planning session for the board, so we can map out our year. A regular, like every couple of months, check in on like, okay, what are we supposed to say we're going to do with a master plan? And then ultimately, are we going to be building task force to work on different things? And I'm going to make myself exhausted just talking about this. So, but I think we just need to maintain this activity, and we've been really good in the past year, really working on the master plan. And there's no rest.
Well,
We have a lot to do, yeah.
I really like that, and because I noticed with the last site plan review that we held, Steve was like trying to get us to focus on certain aspects and run the questions down that way. So it could just be a cheat sheet for use during site plan review. Everybody's kind of talking all over the map. This is here, this is there. Okay, let's talk about the transportation aspect of it. Knock down that,
Yeah.
and then, move on to the landscaping aspect. So, kind of put it into an outline form.
Yeah.
Everybody gets asked the same questions in the same order. And I think it helps the mental process for us hearing the presentations as well.
Right. It would be even great if we could, when we get our packages, we could get with each plan, okay, a page that has like transportation, lighting, landscaping, and then we can go through and write our notes down.
Yes.
So then, and then
great.
so then we have something to sort of focus our questions on. And then, because it's our job to ask questions, and it's our job to make them conform to or work with what we want in this town. It's not, if they, I don't want to sound threatening.
I've tried to limit my overviews
Yep.
that I provide to just the facts of the case without any kind of, oddas or I like this ideas or anything, as neutral as possible. And that certainly would be a great way to do it, because that way, nothing gets lost
Yep.
during the, the meeting.
Yep. So it sounds like the first board workshop we're going to do is working on site plan review, and so we can come up with those lists ourselves. We can go over our site plan review, the process itself. Maybe start to think about wish list of what we might want to see in the future, because it is old at this point. It's older than our master plan, so or older.
And Steve, I got another question for you, if I may. Site plan review and subdivision regulations are town meeting material, are they not?
No,
They are not.
no, planning board.
Okay.
So we could have a public
Thank you.
hearing, and we could update it. Yeah.
Good.
And I think your idea for kind of this checklist, we could do the same for subdivision. The topics
Yeah.
might be
Yeah.
somewhat
Yeah.
different, but
And it'll aid the new members too, because everybody will be up to speed quicker as far as the process is
Yep.
concerned.
Yeah, and I like the idea of really
Not
trying to
the members.
foster a conversation amongst the board, and really asking questions of the developer, thinking about things, deliberating things, and not necessarily trying to push through applications the first time we hear them and see them, because it's our job to make the best decision and not necessarily a rushed decision, so, yeah.
That way, if all the questions get asked, then, then it could come to the floor.
Right.
For the vote, but,
Yep.
it's not
Right.
like that.
But I know I have a hard time when I'm going through these, I'm like, I'm just not even, like, I'm seeing it too broad, and it's hard to sort of know what questions to think
Well,
about.
at least,
so.
like in the zoning board, for variances and special exceptions, you have criteria. And you just run down the list, and it's either up or down because of that. The nature of, what we're doing here is a lot different than that. It's interpretive and, just to, and like you said, you get distracted by other things. But that way it would be just the process, and all the questions that need to be asked are asked at the meeting.
But I think an update is in order too, especially when I hear us asking the same questions about traffic and lighting and things like that, that we're having waivers, or just these following things might be requested by the planning board, and just thinking about what we want to see that we're asking from every person that comes up here.
Right,
So-
so they know ahead of time,
Yeah.
right.
Yep.
Back to your idea of the zoning, when the master plan's adopted, we have a tremendous amount, we have this kind of playbook to start working on, and it doesn't give us all the specifics, so we need to figure that out. But it seems like with the zoning, even maybe before involving a Lakes Region Planning or anybody, for us to look at the districts and craft purpose statements that align with the master plan, and then talk about, based on, this is what we're saying downtown is, or this is what we're saying the commercial district is, then look at the standards and say, do we need all these uses? Can we simplify it to clarify, to make it easier for whoever the staff or the applicant is, but kind of go through and take a first crack at what are the districts, to what degree do they change based on the master plan, and kind of get that out there for people, for them to start to react to and have conversations. And if a draft like that was out there, any applicant has to think about the fact that it's out there, and they can still act under the existing zoning, but if their application is going through the process and the new zoning is adopted, they have to comply. So typically, people will look to the new zoning that's being talked about to see what any subtle changes there are. But I think a lot of that is just setting it up, looking at it together, and having a few meetings so we could go through that. A lot of the other stuff, I think, that's in the zoning that's been added over time, we can address after.
Yep.
And maybe with help from Lakes Region, but this is kind of core piece.
Would you be willing, and not trying to lean on you too much in your professional capability or capacity, but to start to help us develop a timeline to do that?
I would be very willing.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to, as long as I can wear two hats. Like I'd be happy to set it up and take input and kind of facilitate some of the discussions, but I'd like to then sometimes step away and give input.
Yeah.
And just be one voice and not be trying to convince you the
Yep.
way I feel, but because I might be wrong.
Okay.
That'd be great.
Yeah,
And we'll keep Frank happy too.
yeah. I need to keep Frank happy. I see him all the time.
Sorry you won't be around all
Yeah.
the time to. So
Yeah,
you,
as that is being developed, I'll be off the board, so.
So you're the chair now, huh?
Yeah, so I'll be, actually, John Randlett is going to be assigned to the board
Okay.
once we complete the master plan stuff. And he'll be at the regular meetings.
Okay.
so we're thinking the master plan's going to take a couple more years.
Three.
We'll see about that.
But you're the alternate for
Yes,
so.
right.
All right. Oh, I lost my agenda now. I'm totally okay. All right. Any unfinished or other business? No public, so no comments.
Chris, better hurry up.
Is it time?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
All right.